At 9:46 p.m. on August 22, 2025, a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee named Iryna Zarutska boarded what she thought was just another train ride home. The Lynx blue line hung through Charlotte's South End as she settled into an aisle seat, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders after another long shift at Zapetti's Pizzeria. White earbuds blocked out the world around her. Her phone screen glowed as she scrolled, completely unaware that death sat directly behind her. Just 4 minutes. That's all it took for everything to change forever. How many of us have sat alone on public transport, lost in our phones, trusting that we're safe in a public space? We board buses and trains every day, assuming that fellow passengers are just ordinary people heading home, going to work, living their lives. We put in our headphones, check our messages, and let our guard down because we believe in the basic safety of shared spaces. But what happens when that trust gets shattered in the most brutal way possible? Iryna had already survived the unthinkable. She'd fled bombs falling on her beloved Kiev. She'd watched her homeland burn while Russian forces invaded in 2022. She'd made the heartbreaking choice to leave everything she knew behind, crossing continents with her family to find refuge in America. The land of the free. The home of the brave. The place where young women like her could rebuild their dreams without fear. She'd learned English. Enrolled in college. Found work. She was walking neighbors' dogs with that radiant smile everyone remembered. She was sculpting, designing clothes, planning to become a veterinary assistant. After escaping a war zone, Charlotte, North Carolina felt like salvation. Yet on that humid August night, as the train carried her toward what should have been safety, evil rode just 2 feet behind her. A man she'd never met. A stranger whose broken mind had been failed by every system meant to help him. A ticking time bomb that authorities had released back onto the streets just months earlier. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about safety, mental health, and the systems meant to protect us. This isn't just another tragic headline. This is the story of how one young woman's search for refuge became a nightmare that shocked the world. It's about the failures that made her death preventable. And it's about the lessons we must learn before another innocent life gets cut short. Before we explore this heartbreaking story, hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves safety, no matter where they come from. Because Iryna Zarutska deserved so much more than the 4 minutes of terror that ended her life. This is her story. This is our wake-up call. And this is why we can never stop fighting for the world she was trying to find. In February 2022, Iryna Zarutska's world exploded. Not metaphorically, literally. Russian missiles screamed through the sky above Kiev as she huddled with her family in whatever shelter they could find. The 20-year-old art student had been working toward her degree in art and restoration at Synergy College, her hands skilled at breathing life back into damaged sculptures and paintings. How fitting, considering she would soon need to rebuild her own life from scratch. The sounds haunted her sleep. Air raid sirens wailing at 3 a.m. The thunderous crashes that shook buildings to their foundations. The desperate voices of neighbors calling out in the darkness. Every morning brought new horrors, apartment buildings reduced to rubble, families torn apart, entire neighborhoods erased from existence. This was her childhood city, where she'd learned to sculpt clay into beautiful forms, where she designed eccentric clothing that reflected her vibrant spirit. Her mother faced an impossible decision that millions of Ukrainian families confronted: stay and risk death, or flee and abandon everything they'd ever known. There was no good choice. Only survival. The journey to America stretched across weeks of uncertainty. Crowded trains packed with refugees clutching suitcases filled with whatever they could carry. Border crossings where officials stamped documents that represented both escape and exile. Transit camps where hope and desperation mingled in equal measure. Through it all, Iryna held on to her dreams. She would become a veterinary assistant. She would help heal animals the way she'd learned to restore damaged art. Charlotte, North Carolina welcomed them with open arms. The city's growing Ukrainian community provided translation services, housing assistance, and something invaluable, understanding. These were people who knew what it meant to start over in a foreign land, to rebuild identity from nothing. Iryna threw herself into her new life with remarkable determination. She enrolled at Rowan-Kabaras Community College, studying English with the same intensity she'd once applied to her sculptures. Her professors marveled at how quickly she absorbed the language, transforming from hesitant phrases to confident conversation in months rather than years. She wasn't just learning vocabulary, she was claiming her place in this new world. The job at Zapetti's pizzeria represented more than employment. It was independence. Self-sufficiency. Every paycheck proved she could build something meaningful from the ashes of her former life. Her co-workers remember her infectious laugh echoing through the kitchen, her willingness to stay late and help during busy rushes. She never complained about the long hours or the demanding customers. This was her American dream taking shape, one shift at a time. But it was the small moments that revealed who Iryna truly was. Neighbors would see her walking their dogs through Charlotte's tree-lined streets, her face lighting up whenever a golden retriever or energetic terrier bounded toward her. She'd kneel on sidewalks to scratch behind ears and whisper gentle words in Ukrainian. Animals responded to her natural kindness, the same compassion that made her want to dedicate her career to healing them. Her Instagram posts showed a young woman embracing possibility. Photos of her artwork, delicate sculptures that captured motion in stone, clothing designs that blended Ukrainian traditions with American influences. Pictures of her college campus, captioned with gratitude for opportunities her homeland could no longer provide. Images of Charlotte's skyline taken from the same train line where her life would end. The cruel mathematics of survival, she'd traveled 5,000 miles to escape violence, only to encounter it 2 miles from her home. She'd survived bombs dropped from warplanes, only to be killed by a stranger with a folding knife. She'd found sanctuary in America, only to discover that safety was always an illusion. But on that August night, all those dreams, all that hope, would be stolen in less than 4 minutes. DeCarlos Brown Jr. wasn't born a killer. He was born into a system that would fail him for 34 years, creating the very monster it claimed to treat. This isn't an excuse, it's an explanation that might have saved Iryna's life if anyone had listened to the warning signs. Born around 1991, Brown's descent began early. By 2011, at just 20 years old, he was already cycling through Charlotte's courts. Felony larceny. Robbery with a dangerous weapon. Assault. Trespassing. Each arrest followed by release. Each release followed by another crime. The pattern stretched across more than a decade, a predictable rhythm that authorities somehow never interrupted. His most serious offense came in 2014, armed robbery that earned him 5 years behind bars. Prison walls contained his violence temporarily, but they did nothing to address the fractured mind driving it. When he walked free in September 2020, he returned to the same broken system that had created him. Within months, he was arrested for assaulting his own sister. The charges kept mounting, but the solutions never came. Michelle DeWitt watched her son disintegrate before her eyes. As Brown's mother, she understood what others refused to acknowledge. Her son wasn't just criminal, he was sick. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, Brown experienced episodes where reality became negotiable, where voices whispered commands only he could hear. DeWitt fought desperately to get him proper treatment, but every door led to another bureaucratic dead end. She secured an involuntary commitment order, believing this would finally force the system to help. Instead, she discovered a cruel truth: without legal guardianship, even a mother's love meant nothing. The same system that could arrest her son couldn't treat him. The same courts that could sentence him couldn't heal him. Brown bounced between homelessness and temporary shelters, his condition worsening with each failed intervention. January 2025 brought the clearest warning yet. Brown called 911, claiming a man-made material inside his body was controlling his actions. Instead of triggering emergency mental health intervention, this cry for help resulted in charges for misusing the emergency system. Magistrate Judge Teresa Stokes released him with time served, sending a severely mentally ill man back onto the streets without treatment, supervision, or support. Have you ever wondered how many people like DeCarlos are walking among us? Men and women whose minds have fractured under the weight of untreated illness, cycling through jails that warehouse rather than heal. The statistics are staggering. Nearly 40% of people in county jails have a diagnosed mental illness. Most receive no treatment. Most return to the community sicker than when they entered. What happens when the systems meant to help actually enable harm? Brown's case reveals the devastating answer. His forensic evaluation in July 2025 questioned his mental capacity to stand trial, yet he remained free to board that train on August 22. His family begged for help. His criminal record screamed for intervention. His psychotic episodes demanded immediate psychiatric care. Instead, he got a lifetime ban from public transportation after he'd already killed someone. If you think our mental health system needs serious reform, let me know in the comments below. Because what happened next could have been prevented if we had the courage to fix what we know is broken. 9:46 p.m. The Lynx Blue Line doors close with their familiar mechanical hiss. Iryna settles into seat 12A, an aisle seat that offers her quick access when she reaches her stop. The train car holds about 15 passengers scattered throughout, late shift workers heading home, students returning from evening classes, ordinary people living ordinary lives. None of them know they're about to witness the unthinkable. Iryna pulls out her white earbuds, the same ones she'd worn countless times before. Her phone screen glows as she scrolls through messages, maybe checking Instagram, possibly texting her family that she's on her way home. She's still wearing her Zapeti's uniform, the smell of pizza and bread still clinging to her clothes. Her work shift is over. She's earned her rest. 2 seats directly behind her, DeCarlos Brown Jr. boards without a ticket. Surveillance cameras capture his every movement as he walks down the aisle, passing empty seats, passing other passengers, choosing to sit directly behind the young Ukrainian woman he's never met. There's no interaction. No words exchanged. No acknowledgement that either exists in the other's world. For 4 minutes, nothing happens. Iryna remains absorbed in her phone. Brown sits motionless, staring ahead. To any observer, they're just 2 strangers sharing public transportation. The train rumbles through Charlotte's evening darkness, carrying its passengers toward destinations they'll never reach. 9:50 p.m. Brown reaches into his gray hoodie pocket. The folding knife emerges slowly, deliberately. Not frantically, not in a moment of sudden rage, but with the calculated precision of someone whose fractured mind has made a decision. Cameras capture him standing, his movements fluid and purposeful. Iryna remains completely unaware, her earbuds creating a barrier between her and the horror approaching from behind. The first strike comes without warning. Brown's hand moves forward, the blade finding its target. Iryna's body jerks forward in her seat, confusion replacing concentration on her face. She doesn't immediately understand what's happening. The human brain struggles to process the impossible, especially when it arrives without context or explanation. The second strike follows quickly. Then the third. At least one finds her neck, the most vulnerable part of her slender frame. Blood appears on Brown's hand as he steps back, his work complete. The entire attack lasts less than 30 seconds. Iryna collapses in her seat, her hand instinctively reaching for her throat. The phone falls from her grasp, clattering to the train floor still glowing with whatever message she'd been reading. Her earbuds pull free, finally connecting her to the sounds around her, but by then, the only sounds are her own struggle for breath and the screams of passengers realizing what they've witnessed. Stop. Take a breath. I know this is hard to hear, but we need to understand what happened to prevent it from happening again. The passenger's initial reaction is shock-induced paralysis. For precious seconds, nobody moves. The human mind doesn't immediately process such violence, especially in a mundane setting like public transportation. When reality finally penetrates their disbelief, chaos erupts. Some passengers rushed toward Iryna, attempting first aid with shaking hands and desperate voices. Others scrambled toward the opposite end of the car, as far from the violence as possible. Someone fumbles for their phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The emergency call captures voices thick with panic. There's been a stabbing on the train. A woman is bleeding. We need help now. Brown wipes the blood from his hand with chilling casualness. He walks calmly to the other end of the train car, removes his gray hoodie, and settles into a different seat as if nothing has happened. When the train reaches East/West Boulevard station at 9:52 p.m., he exits without hurry, without looking back, without any sign of remorse or awareness of what he's just done. The folding knife is discovered later near the platform, discarded like trash. Emergency responders arrive within minutes, but minutes are eternities when someone is dying. Paramedics work frantically over Iryna's motionless form, but the damage is too severe. At 9:55 p.m., just 9 minutes after she boarded the train with dreams of home, Iryna Zarutska is pronounced dead. Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officers find Brown still on the platform, blood still visible on his clothing. He offers no resistance when they approach. No explanation for his actions. No recognition that he's just destroyed a life, shattered a family, and traumatized an entire community. The randomness remains the most haunting aspect. No prior connection. No argument. No provocation. Just 4 minutes of shared space that ended with senseless violence. Detective Burr from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Homicide Unit didn't need long to solve this case. Brown stood on the platform, blood on his clothes, making no attempt to flee or hide his involvement. The arrest was swift, almost anticlimactic after such brutal violence. Within hours, he faced first-degree murder charges and a lifetime ban from Charlotte area transit system. The investigation that followed confirmed everyone's worst fears. This was completely random. FBI agents joined local detectives, analyzing every piece of evidence, every connection, every possible motive. They found nothing. Brown and Iryna had never met, never spoken, never existed in each other's worlds until those fatal 4 minutes. The surveillance footage told the entire story, a story without reason, without logic, without any explanation that could bring comfort to those demanding answers. CCTV cameras became crucial witnesses, capturing every second from multiple angles. The footage would later become evidence in court and, controversially, viral content on social media. But for investigators, it provided irrefutable proof that this attack emerged from nothing more than one man's untreated mental illness colliding with one woman's ordinary evening commute. Charlotte's Ukrainian community gathered within days, their candles flickering against the darkness of their shared grief. These were people who understood loss. They'd fled bombs and bullets, left behind everything familiar. Yet Iryna's death struck differently. War has its own terrible logic, but this made no sense at all. Vigils filled with tears and prayers in both English and Ukrainian, voices breaking as they remembered a young woman who'd survived so much only to die so senselessly. The GoFundMe page for Iryna's Aunt Valeria became a focal point for community support, raising over $41,000 from strangers moved by her story. Each donation carried messages of outrage, sympathy, and desperate hope that her death might prevent others. Social media exploded with fury once the surveillance footage leaked on September 6, 2025. The video spread like wildfire across platforms, shared millions of times within hours. High-profile figures amplified the story. Elon Musk tweeted about urban safety failures, Piers Morgan questioned America's mental health crisis on his show, conservative commentator Benny Johnson framed it as evidence of judicial system breakdown. The viral nature of her death brought international attention. Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs contacted Charlotte authorities, ensuring their citizens' murder received proper investigation. News outlets from Kiev to London covered the story, making Iryna's name synonymous with the vulnerability of refugees seeking safety. How do you process something so senseless? Charlotte struggled with that question as protests and vigils continued for weeks. Mayor Vi Lyles faced harsh criticism for initially focusing on Brown's mental health struggles rather than acknowledging the system failures that enabled his violence. Katz responded with promised reforms, increased fare inspections, new ticket validators, expanded security staffing. Critics noted these changes came after tragedy rather than before, raising uncomfortable questions about preventable deaths. What would you do if this happened in your community? The question haunted Charlotte residents who'd ridden that same train line, sat in those same seats, trusted in the same basic assumption of safety that Iryna had carried to her death. This wasn't inevitable. Every system failure that led to Iryna's death was preventable, predictable, and inexcusable. Her murder represents the deadly intersection of broken mental health care, inadequate housing policy, and a justice system that warehouses problems instead of solving them. Start with the mental health crisis that created DeCarlos Brown Jr.'s violence. America spends over $280 billion annually on mental health services, yet people like Brown fall through every crack in the system. His schizophrenia diagnosis should have triggered immediate, comprehensive treatment. Instead, it became another line item in police reports, another excuse for judicial inaction. Magistrate Judge Teresa Stokes faced intense scrutiny after releasing Brown in January 2025 following his bizarre 911 call about man-made materials controlling his actions. Critics attacked her decision, claiming personal conflicts of interest due to her work at a behavioral health facility. Whether those accusations hold merit, the outcome remains undeniable. A severely mentally ill man returned to the streets without treatment, supervision, or support. But focusing solely on Judge Stokes misses the larger systemic breakdown. She operated within a framework that offers judges limited options for defendants like Brown. North Carolina law requires specific criteria for involuntary commitment, criteria that prioritize individual rights over public safety. Brown didn't meet the legal threshold for forced treatment, despite his mother's desperate pleas and his own admission that external forces controlled his behavior. Michelle DeWitt's struggle exemplifies the impossible position families face when mental illness strikes. She secured an involuntary commitment order for her son, believing this would finally force the system to help. Instead, she discovered that without legal guardianship, an expensive, time-consuming process, even maternal love carries no legal weight. The same courts that could arrest Brown couldn't treat him. The same system that warehoused him in jail couldn't heal his fractured mind. Homelessness compounds every aspect of mental health crisis. Brown cycled between shelters and streets, his condition deteriorating without stable housing or consistent care. Research shows that people experiencing both mental illness and homelessness are significantly more likely to commit violent crimes, yet funding for dual diagnosis programs remains woefully inadequate. Charlotte, like most American cities, treats homelessness as a housing problem and mental illness as a medical problem, ignoring their deadly intersection. The revolving door of justice failed everyone involved. Brown's criminal history spanning over a decade should have triggered intensive intervention. Instead, each arrest led to temporary incarceration followed by release without treatment. Jails became the default mental health facilities, housing people who needed doctors in cells designed for criminals. Upon release, Brown returned to the same circumstances that created his crimes: untreated illness, unstable housing, and social isolation. Mecklenburg County District Attorney Spencer Merriweather identified the core problem: insufficient funding for individuals who cycle through the legal system without receiving appropriate mental health care. His office processes hundreds of cases like Brown's annually, people whose crimes stem from untreated psychiatric conditions rather than criminal intent. Policy solutions exist but require political courage to implement. Comprehensive mental health courts that mandate treatment instead of incarceration. Assisted outpatient treatment programs that provide ongoing supervision for high-risk individuals. Crisis intervention teams trained to recognize and respond to psychiatric emergencies. Adequate funding for dual diagnosis treatment facilities that address both mental illness and substance abuse. If you believe we need better mental health resources, share this video to spread awareness. Because the next DeCarlos Brown Jr. is already cycling through our broken systems, and the next Iryna Zarutska is boarding a train somewhere, trusting in safety that our failures cannot guarantee. Iryna's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the society we've built and the promises we make to those seeking refuge within our borders. Her death illuminates fractures that extend far beyond one tragic night on a Charlotte train. The vulnerability of refugees and immigrants emerges as a central theme. These are people who've already survived unimaginable trauma, who've lost everything familiar, who arrive in our communities carrying nothing but hope for safety. We welcome them with ceremonies and speeches about America being a beacon of freedom, yet we fail to address the systemic issues that make that safety illusory. Iryna escaped Russian bombs only to encounter American violence, not because evil is inevitable, but because we've normalized dysfunction in our most basic systems. Public transportation safety affects millions of Americans daily. Every person who boards a bus, train, or subway makes the same trust calculation Iryna made, that shared public spaces offer reasonable security. Her murder shatters that assumption, revealing how quickly ordinary commutes can become crime scenes. The randomness makes it more terrifying. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a domestic dispute that escalated. This was mental illness weaponized by systemic neglect. Mental health stigma kills people. We treat psychiatric conditions like personal failings rather than medical emergencies. Brown's family faced shame and isolation instead of community support. His mother's attempts to get help were met with bureaucratic barriers rather than urgent intervention. Society's discomfort with mental illness created the very conditions that enabled his violence. We'd rather warehouse mentally ill people in jails than fund the treatment that could prevent their crimes. Community responsibility extends beyond individual actions to collective advocacy. Every resident of Charlotte, every person who rides public transportation, every family touched by mental illness has a stake in preventing the next tragedy. Yet most people assume someone else will fix these problems, that politicians will act, that systems will improve, that tragedies like this are aberrations rather than predictable outcomes of policy choices. The mathematics of violence reveal how one person's untreated condition ripples through entire communities. Brown's illness didn't just affect him, it traumatized passengers, devastated Iryna's family, sparked international outrage, and shattered trust in public safety. Mental health isn't a private matter when its consequences become public tragedies. Iryna's death demands we examine our priorities as a society. We spend billions on punishment after violence occurs but pennies on prevention that could stop it. We build more jails instead of more treatment facilities. We hire more police officers instead of more mental health counselors. We react to crises instead of addressing their root causes. The ultimate lesson is that systemic change requires sustained pressure from ordinary citizens who refuse to accept preventable tragedies as inevitable. Iryna deserved better. The next potential victim deserves better. And we have the knowledge, resources, and moral obligation to provide it. Iryna Zarutska's legacy lives in the changes her death has forced us to confront. Charlotte's Ukrainian community doesn't just remember her as a victim, they celebrate her as an artist whose sculptures captured movement in stone, a young woman whose smile brightened their neighborhood walks, a refugee who embodied the resilience of her people. Her Instagram posts remain active, filled with comments from strangers worldwide who never met her but were moved by her story. The dream she carried across continents will never be fulfilled. There will be no veterinary practice where she heals injured animals. No art gallery featuring her unique blend of Ukrainian tradition and American innovation. No family of her own to carry forward the strength that brought her through war to a new homeland. The ripple effects of potential, all the lives she might have touched, all the beauty she might have created, vanish into the void left by preventable violence. Legal proceedings continue as Brown awaits trial, his mental competency still under evaluation. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they turn. Charlotte has implemented promised transit security improvements, increased police presence, enhanced emergency communication systems, expanded mental health crisis intervention training for staff. These changes honor Iryna's memory by making the system safer for future passengers. But policy changes alone cannot restore what was lost. Iryna's family grieves in private, supported by a community that understands their pain. Her Aunt Valeria, who shared her Charlotte home, carries forward despite the overwhelming loss. The GoFundMe donations have helped with immediate needs, but no amount of money can fill the space left by a life cut short at 23. Her spirit of determination deserves remembrance. She learned a new language, embraced a foreign culture, worked tirelessly to build something meaningful from nothing. She represented the best of the immigrant experience: courage, hope, and unwavering commitment to creating a better future. That future was stolen not by war, not by natural disaster, but by our collective failure to care for the most vulnerable members of our society. Iryna's story must become a catalyst for the changes she deserved to live to see. Every person who learns her name, every viewer who demands better mental health resources, every citizen who votes for policies that prioritize treatment over incarceration becomes part of her continuing legacy. Subscribe if you believe in fighting for justice and systemic change. And remember, Iryna Zarutska was more than a victim. She was a dreamer, an artist, a survivor. Let's make sure her death wasn't in vain. Because the next time you see someone struggling with mental illness, or a refugee trying to build a new life, remember Iryna's story. We all have a role to play in creating the safe world she was looking for.